The Ndrangheta is a criminal organization similar to the Italian Mafia that operates mainly in Calabria, Italy. Since the 1950s, the organization has also branched out into other parts of Europe, as well as the United States and Australia. The leadership and structure of the organization are based almost solely on blood ties, and its main activities include drug, human, and arms trafficking, money laundering, loan sharking, extortion, and more. Here are just a few cases that are related to one of the world's most powerful and most deadly criminal organizations. Gennaro Musea was married and had 4 children when he moved to Calabria in the 1970s. He was working for his construction company with maritime projects, seeing as he was a marine engineer. His company became the second largest construction company in southern Italy between the 70s and 80s. He worked to protect the Italian coast, and many of his projects still exist today, which is a testament to his skills. In 1980, Gennaro began to work on a project constructing the tourist port of Bagnara. For those of you who don't know, in construction, a tender is essentially a bid for a project, and any company that wants to work the project has to win the bid. Unfortunately, the Costanzo family won the tender, which meant that the construction Gennaro had been hoping to undertake was going to be run by a notorious mafia family. However, Gennaro noticed multiple irregularities in the process of awarding the contract to the Costanzo family, and he managed to get the tender annulled. A new tender was scheduled for May of 1982, and Gennaro hoped to win the second time. Sadly, he had crossed a very powerful family, and they were not happy with his actions. On May 3rd of 1982, he left his home at 8:20 a.m., and his wife said goodbye to him from the balcony of their home. He entered his vehicle, but just as he sat down in the driver's seat, the ground shook and there was a deafening roar as the car exploded. Gennaro disintegrated immediately. The car flew up in the air and came crashing back down. A small chasm formed in the asphalt beneath the vehicle, which can allegedly still be seen to this day when it rains heavily. As it turns out, the Costanzo family had decided that the proper course of action for being denied their tender was to plant a very powerful charge of TNT beneath the driver's seat in Gennaro's vehicle. Just like that, his wife lost her husband, and his children lost their father. All because he had tried to do the right thing by reporting criminal activity in the tender. He would have turned 57 in 2 days. The explosion also injured 4 other people and caused damage to 10 nearby cars, as well as the surrounding buildings. Gennaro's wife attempted to get justice for his murder, but that would prove to be much more difficult than she initially thought. A prosecutor allegedly told her to go home and give up because she had children. In other words, stop trying to prosecute members of the mafia, or you and your children will be next. 6 years would pass before Gennaro's case was closed. It's unclear what exactly the outcome was or what the details surrounding the closing of the case were. The only sources I found during my research were small, and I had to translate them from Italian, so if any of you speak Italian and can find more information, let me know in the comments. In 1993, the case was reopened by the District Anti-Mafia Directorate of Reggio Calabria and was completed by its deputy prosecutor, but it never went to trial. In 2009, a street was named after Gennaro, but none of the people involved in his murder were ever apprehended or charged. They got away with murder scot-free. Gennaro's family lost a father, a husband, and a provider, and in return, all they ever received was a street name. Angela Costantino was only 16 years old when she got married to Pietro Lo Giudice. The girl had devoted herself to Pietro, who she thought was the man of her dreams. By 25 years old, Angela had given birth to 4 children. Her life was nowhere near a paradise. Angela had no idea just how serious her situation was. She had become trapped in a marriage at an early age, but most importantly, she had no idea how much weight her new last name carried. The Lo Giudice family was inextricably connected to the criminal scene of Reggio Calabria, and Angela's husband had no intentions of leaving the 'Ndrangheta. Pietro was 20 years older than Angela and had lived a criminal life for a long time. He was eventually arrested and incarcerated. During Pietro's time in prison, Angela became very lonely and dreamed of having a new and better life. You can hardly blame her for that, but unfortunately, there are some people who disagree. Angela eventually fell in love with another man while Pietro rotted behind bars. The Lo Giudice family found out about this relationship and thus began her prolonged torture. They stalked Angela and forced her to move into a smaller house on their property, which made it easier for them to control her. Angela was treated violently and had strict rules imposed over every aspect of her life, which would have been horrible enough. However, it only became worse when they found out about her pregnancy. Angela's new lover had given her a child. This was something that the Lo Giudice family could not tolerate. In their eyes, Angela's pregnancy was a stain on their honor. They forced her to get an abortion, but the news of her pregnancy had already gone public. There was only one option left from the barbaric perspective of Pietro's family. On March 16th of 1994, Angela woke up with a plan to visit her husband in prison. Strangely, she never showed up. The authorities found her car abandoned in Via San Giovanni, with documents from the mental health service inside. At her house, her 4 children were alone and crying. The police put the pieces of the puzzle together. Angela was unhappy with her living situation and clearly had depressive tendencies. She must have fled voluntarily in order to start a new life for herself, right? Well, I'm sure you all know that wasn't the case. Sadly, without any hard evidence of a murder and without finding a body, the police did not question their initial hypothesis. The case was dismissed due to the lack of evidence. It seemed as if Angela's murder would never receive any justice. Years later, the Reggio Calabria prosecutor's office finally changed their tune. Pietro's brother, Maurizio, confessed to the murder of Angela during an interrogation in 1999. In 2002, a man named Paolo Iano stated that the entire Lo Giudice family had agreed to the murder. These confessions were corroborated by Domenico Serra in 2009, who stated that Maurizio had killed Angela for cheating on his brother. You see, Angela did not disappear voluntarily. Instead, her nephew and 2 brothers-in-law had decided to resolve the family's extramarital problem by strangling her to death. In February of 2015, the Assise Court of Appeal of Reggio Calabria sentenced all 3 of the men who had directly been involved in killing Angela to 30 years in prison. As it turns out, this was not the only time someone would be forced to pay for their involvement with the Lo Giudice family. Barbara Corvi married Roberto Lo Giudice at a young age, very similar to Angela. She bore 2 children for him and helped run their agricultural shops. In October of 2009, she confessed to Roberto that she had an affair, again in very similar fashion to Angela's case. On October 27th, Barbara simply vanished without a trace. In the months following her disappearance, Barbara's family received a postcard that was allegedly written by Barbara, claiming that she had voluntarily left and needed some time alone. This postcard was examined by handwriting experts, who determined that it was not Barbara's handwriting. Furthermore, Barbara had not taken any bags, clothing, or other possessions with her when she vanished. A prosecutor stated that he believed Barbara had disappeared as a result of the mafia's belief in privately settling domestic affairs. Italian mafia families tend to ignore options such as divorce, opting instead for more violent solutions. However, the investigation was closed in 2015 without any arrests for unknown reasons. The case was not reopened until March of 2020, when Roberto was arrested on suspicion of murdering his own wife. It's unclear to me exactly what the outcome of all this was. Again, the sources I used for this video were all written originally in Italian, meaning the translations are not perfect. I may have missed some information, so let me know in the comments if you have anything to add. Despite the widespread power, wealth, and influence of the 'Ndrangheta, they are not without their internal struggles. In 1974, there was a triumvirate, or a group in which 3 men held the most power. This triumvirate included Antonio Macri, Domenico Tripoddo, and Girolamo Piromai. These 3 men had ruled the Ndrangheta for 15 years, but 1974 saw the implementation of new criminal activities in the organization. Piromai wanted to include drug trafficking and other new crimes in the organization's portfolio, as well as a new system called La Santa that would allow the organization to directly contact public officials for the purpose of accessing public work contracts. Tripoddo and Macri both opposed these changes, instead favoring more traditional criminal activity. In September of 1974, the 3 bosses had a meeting to discuss these changes. The meeting did not go well. Insults were exchanged and it very nearly became violent. The only reason nobody died was because Macri played the role of peacemaker. However, a short while after this meeting, the situation escalated when Tripoddo refused to attend the wedding of one of Piromai's close allies. At this point, civil war was inevitable. All that needed to happen was one act of violence. From there, the dominoes would inevitably fall. Tripoddo was the man who pushed the first domino. On November 24th of 1974, he murdered a man named Giovanni De Stefano in a bar and badly wounded his brother, Giorgio De Stefani. Piromai knew he needed to strike back, but he also knew that he had to raise the stakes. On January 20th of 1975, Macri was executed in his hometown by an ally of the De Stefano brothers. Finally, on February 21st of 1975, Tripoddo was arrested and incarcerated at a prison in Naples. While serving his sentence, he was stabbed to death under orders of the De Stefano family. This murder marked the apparent end of the Civil War, but there was one last power move to be made. On November 7th of 1977, Giorgio De Stefano was executed under Piromai's orders. He was afraid that the De Stefano family would become too powerful to control. These murders were only the most famous and important moves in the war. In total, 233 people were killed in just 3 years. There were also smaller local conflicts that were sparked by the larger-scale war. When all was said and done, Piromai was the victor. He had successfully removed all of his rivals and established the Ndrangheta as an entrepreneurial organization. The Ndrangheta wasn't satisfied with just one civil war, of course. In 1985, a project was in the works to construct a bridge between Calabria and Sicily over the Strait of Messina. A struggle broke out over the public contracts. The De Stefano family also attempted to encroach on another family's territory, which added to the conflict. Giuseppina Condeo, the sister of the De Stefano's second-in-command, married Antonio Imerte, who was the leader of another sect of the Ndrangheta. Paolo De Stefano feared that this marriage might pose a challenge to his power, so he had his brother, Orazio De Stefano, marry Antoinette Benester, the niece of Giovanni Tigano, one of the most powerful bosses in the country. This marriage solidified the alliance between the De Stefano family and the Tigano family. On October 11th of 1985, the De Stefanos attempted to kill Antonio Imerte in a bombing, but Imerte survived. His retaliation was quick and brutal. On October 13th, he murdered Paolo De Stefano. After this murder, a man named Domenico Libri became the new leader of the De Stefano and Tigano alliance. Domenico's son was in prison at the time, and a sniper killed him as he walked through the prison yard. 6 months later, another sniper almost killed Domenico as he exited the courthouse in Reggio Calabria. Unlike the first Civil War, this one ended without a clear winner. In September of 1991, a peace was brokered and the conflict was settled. Bosses of various other sects of the mafia helped mediate the situation and vouched for both sides. Despite this peace agreement, the Second Civil War had been significantly bloodier than the first. While the casualties aren't known for certain, they were estimated to be in the range of 500 to 1,000. The Sicilian mafia contributed to the peace process and also helped to establish a system within the 'Ndrangheta that was designed to prevent infighting. It's truly astounding to learn about these criminal organizations. They have caused countless deaths and are still active today.